Good morning on this Wednesday. I'm Jeff Hullinger. This is Decision Georgia, and we are looking at Gabriel Sterling right now from the Secretary of State's office. He is giving an update as counties continue to finish counting the votes in Georgia's Senate runoffs. Let's listen in.
547 Election Day votes. We have 2,073,829 advanced votes, the early voting in person, and 1,017,785 absentee by mail votes that have been counted. Now, with the margins we're seeing, obviously what the final outcomes will be dependent upon is a couple of things. The absentee ballots that came in on Tuesday that many counties checked in and finished up already, but some of the larger counties have not yet. So let's go from the top. I'll do this in the order of the largest amount of absentee ballots that we know have been checked in but not actually scanned and uploaded into the results yet. Number one is Dekalb County with 17,902. Let me stop for a second. Let me throw every caveat in the world at this. Counties are still putting stuff in. They're also scanning, so these numbers will be a little bit fluid during the day today. But these are the basic ones we have as of 10 a.m. this morning. This is the latest numbers we have available. The next one down is Henry County at 9,078. After that is Cobb at 5,896. Chatham at 5,318. Fulton at 5,294. Gwinnett at 5,068. Thomas at 2,078. Bryan at 1,515. Meriwether at 1,325. Doherty at 1,200. Fayette at 1,139. And Forsyth at 752. They trail off after that. Clayton has some, 528. Lincoln, 543. Peach, 524. But you get the basics. The biggest buckets of them are from the metro area with a handful scattered about the state. We have requested of the counties, we don't have a right to direct them, but we have requested that they get all of the absentee ballots accounted for, as in they have received them, they know they're there, and put into our voter registration system, ENET, as of 1 p.m. today. Most counties will make that deadline. Other ones are working diligently to get through that. But again, I want to remind everybody, these folks are all tired. They've had a long day and a long week and a long month and a long year. But they are doing their best to get these results quickly. I know some people were surprised how quickly the results did come in, but that's the advantage of having 3 races on the ballots. Again, another point of interest for people locally, whereas we've seen both incumbent Republican senators fall behind in the vote count, the incumbent Public Service Commissioner, Lauren Bubba McDonald, has continued to maintain his lead. And with the number of ballots out, it looks like he may be able to win as well, but it looks like he will likely be within the margin of the recount, which is a half a point. But again, we don't know until all the ballots are in. And with that, I will take any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Justin.
Has there been
Sorry. Need more coffee.
Has there been any evidence or any indication of any potential fraud or irregularities?
No evidence of any irregularities. The biggest thing we've seen is from the president's fertile mind of finding fraud where none exists. We've seen a couple of other things. There was somebody put out a tweet that took a picture of shredded paper and said, "We are in Georgia, and here are shredded ballots." So that is the extent of the evidence we've seen. We've had a few things come in on the hotline that might be investigated, but again, we've seen nothing widespread. We've seen nothing that seems real in any way, shape, or form, quite honestly.
Gabriel,
Ma'am.
Republicans have suffered a double defeat here with the presidential race and now apparently the 2 Senate races. Where do you think the blame lies within the Republican Party, specifically the Georgia GOP?
I think you've heard this answer from me over the last 24 hours 2 times. President Donald J. Trump. Between him and a couple of other people who ran for office, didn't necessarily think it all the way through as to what the outcomes could be. It all comes out of that. When you say your vote doesn't count, then you have people you've laid your hands on and said, these are my people, who say, don't come and vote. Then you spark a civil war within a GOP that needed to be united to get through a tough fight like this in a state that has been trending from the point of view of Republicans the other direction for years now. I mean, let's remember Stacey Abrams, who has yet to concede the 2018 gubernatorial race, came within 55,000 votes of winning that race. So you need to have a unified team with a unified message looking to the future. And that somebody pointed out, I believe it was a CNN commentator, if you looked over the last 2 months, the President of the United States spent more time attacking Governor Kemp and Secretary Raffensperger than he did Raphael Warnock and Senator to be probably Ossoff.
And how does that sit with you as a Republican?
It irritates me. What else we got?
What are the numbers that you've seen so far about those that are still outstanding, places that they're located, suggest about whether or not, if Ossoff does win, could that be outside of the recount margin?
Well, right now we look at 60,470 that are available to come in for that. That number will go up as they continue to process ballots from the areas they're from. It makes it look like Jon Ossoff will likely have a margin outside of the 0.5% to avoid a recount. And obviously, Reverend Warnock is ahead of him right now. So if Ossoff avoids that recount, so does Reverend Warnock.
And is there a breakdown of how many of these are potentially absentee ballots that will receive that day?
These are all absentee.
Provisional
These are all
ballots?
absentees. We're one of the other things we're asking for the counties is to get us in the provisional ballots. We know the provisional ballots are going to be in Fulton and DeKalb in the thousands because there's a issue where many Democrat turnout machines say go to any precinct, so people vote out a precinct. In this particular election, it doesn't matter as much because every precinct had the same people on the ballot. But we've got to make sure people get out of the habit of doing that, because if you vote out a precinct in a regular election, you skip all those races in the bottom. So you're really disenfranchising voters when you train them to do that. It's a bad practice.
But you're saying we don't have a read on how many, right now, total provisional ballots there are, essentially?
No, we don't, but we can spitball it since it'll probably be somewhere south of 10,000. Steve.
Are you concerned at all about blurring the line between an election official and a pundit with some of the comments that you made over the last 24 hours and the way that that might be interpreted once the results are questioned by some who are unhappy?
Yeah, on occasion, but people ask my personal opinion, and this is one of those things where it's a weird blended position. And I'm a well-known Republican. I can't really hide that fact, but I try to make sure I walk the line, and I think with the way this office has conducted itself, it would have been a hell of a lot easier for us to go along with some of these presidential claims than to actually stand up for the truth in these cases. So I understand some people have that question. I've had to deal with it on Twitter. Last I checked, I'm an American. I have a First Amendment right to answer some of these things, but I try to separate from my role here and my role when I answer specific political type questions. You're right. But anybody in these positions, every human being alive has opinions. I just tend to be a little more honest about what I think of them, and I think that makes me do my job better and gives me some more credibility when it comes to it. Yes, yes.
On the military ballots, you said yesterday there were about 17,000 outstanding.
We're down to about 14,000 that are still outstanding. It's the military and overseas. I don't have a breakdown between the two different types right now, but it's 14,000 available. And to remind everybody, they can be postmarked by yesterday and be received and accepted by Friday. But historically, it's going to be more than zero that come in. It's going to be a lot less than 14,000 that come in.
How do you, we had...
Oh, hey, Mark, I didn't see you back there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. We had very high election day turnout yesterday, higher than the presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? What's the explanation for such high election day turnout after, good but not that good early turnout?
Well, a couple of things happened there. In the primary in June, we have 880,000 show up. In the general election, we had 970,000. I'm spitballing here. I've got a lot of numbers in my head right now. And we had 1.3 million show up yesterday. Part of that was, again, the president encouraging Republicans not to use mail or early vote options. And some people were just going to skip it altogether. I think what we saw happen on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was that the areas that had seen depressed turnout compared to metro areas started to show up. And I think what happened in some partisan circles, Republican sides, it started dawning on them, oh crap, we're going to lose this if we don't turn out. So there was a real big push to get people out the last day. But the Democrats did a very good job of banking their votes early and using the options that have been available to the Georgians for, over a decade. So there's nothing new here. These are all tools that have been available. Coronavirus changed some voting patterns and behaviors. Georgia is historically a in-person voting state. So I think part of it is just people getting used to doing it again. The threat of coronavirus, while it's going up and some people it's perceived as going down. And just let me say this, for the elections workers and the launching of a new system, this state, this office, and these counties launched the largest new voting system in the history of the United States and did it in record time, executed it well, in the middle of a pandemic, and had record turnout in each and every election we saw. That is unprecedented. And I want to give a big thank you again to the elections officials and poll workers and elections workers who really worked their tails off to make this a successful election for Georgians. One of the things we haven't heard about in this election was nobody was complaining about lines. Nobody's saying they were disenfranchised. Everybody who wanted to vote had an opportunity to vote, and we feel very proud of that fact.
And have you looked at whether election day turnout was higher than expected or lower than expected in Republican or Democratic areas?
I haven't had an opportunity to do a breakdown by that. We've been trying to really just stay on the counties and work with them to get sure we get like I said before, fast is good, accurate is better. Analysis can come later to see the specifics. We want to make sure we get the right results out to take away the opportunity for people to say that there was fraud and there's questions to be had about these things, because these are the results. These are the ballots. We have known since last week, since last Friday, that there were going to be 2,073,000 and some odd votes that were going to be cast in the advanced bucket, because that was how many were cast. The president continues to say, oh, they're finding ballots. These were advanced that came out of nowhere. No, we have known that Dekalb County had 171,000 ballots since Friday evening, Saturday morning. So the statements he keeps on putting out there are incorrect, and they undermine people's faith in the election process. And again, this is a bipartisan problem. If you go back and do polls from 2016 of Democrat voters, there are over 50% that still believe Russians hacked voting machines to say they flip votes for Donald Trump. That didn't happen. You know what else didn't happen? Dominion machines did not flip votes for Joe Biden. Neither of those things happened. And everybody on both sides of the aisle who continue to make these kinds of claims undermine the election process in the country, undermine democracy, and undermine the health of the republic.
Have you received any inquiries or complaints from either of the two, or any of the candidates on anything that has happened thus far, or any indication?
I think it's a little early right now for that, but I fully anticipate we will have questions, and there may be legitimate questions out there from people, and it's our job to answer them as frankly as we can with the facts as best we can, as quickly as we can.
What
Yes.
do you need by 1 p.m. from the counties if they would?
We made a request of them because in Georgia, the cutoff time to receive absentee ballots other than the military and overseas is 7 p.m. on election day. That's when the drop boxes get locked down and the mail comes in. Nothing else can come in after that. So while they're busy doing election day activities, it's hard to say, we're going to have a group of people over here while the rest of us are counting. You go deal with absentee ballots. Some of these counties are under-resourced. Some of them have big staffs, but they're exhausted and focused on getting one thing done at a time. So what we did is we're asking them, account for all the ballots you have in so that we can tell the press, and the press can tell the voters, this is the outward bound of the number of ballots we can have to count, so we know where there actually is. Or it can give the press and political talking heads the opportunity to make a call. And in this particular case, the last couple of calls to be made are in the PSC race and in the Ossoff Perdue race. What else? Yes, ma'am.
In terms of high turnout, newly registered voters, does your office have any insight into those numbers and how they may have played a role since general?
Not yet, but I will say one thing. It was an impressive feat by whoever did it to get 100,000 people to show up on a January election who did not show up in a November election. That is probably a margin. My assumption is that those are probably Democrat voters, given the demographics we've seen of that, and that is a testament to hard work that was done while Republicans were busy attacking the governor and my boss. The Democrats were out there knocking on doors and getting people to turn out to vote.
And it's looking
Yes.
like North Georgia had a drop-off in voting. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Well, I haven't had a chance to dig deep into it, but people who I trust have stated that, so I will accept that it's likely true. And that is the area where we believe that, like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, along with the president, have essentially, through their actions and their statements, discouraged voting by Republican voters, which have ended up hurting both of our incumbent senators.
And were there any areas of turnout that surprised you?
Frankly, all of them did. I mean, this is a runoff. We had 4.3 million votes cast, so almost 4.4. We had 5 million cast in general election. That is unheard of. In 2018, we had 4 million votes cast in the original. In the runoff, there was 1.485 million. The record previously for a runoff was 2.1 million with Saxby-Chambliss. I mean, this blows every turnout model away. Now, let me say this with one caveat. When you spend $500 million of money from out of state, you can get people to turn out. So that's the other thing that's a little bit different than most runoffs.
Okay.
One more?
last
Okay.
question. You mentioned, you were very complimentary of how things went, and there were no lines, and people didn't have to wait. Is there intention then from the Secretary of State's office to keep some of these methods that were put in place for COVID-19, but obviously made it a lot easier for more people to vote?
The thing is, all of these methods have been available for decades in this state. So the one thing we do have an issue with that makes it very difficult in the counties is because of the increased use of the absentee process. Essentially, there's a 3-week period where they have to run 3 elections at a time, essentially. You have to run the 3 weeks of early voting, then you have to run an absentee ballot program that literally by law begins 45 days beforehand. So you're running that the entire time. And then about 2 weeks before the actual election, you have to do the processes of the general election. These people are understaffed, they're underpaid, they're under-resourced. So something has to give on that one. So right now we have no excuse absentee. We may see a move by the legislature to move to an excuse-based system and taking away signature match by having a specific photo ID or unique identifier PIN like other states do, driver's license, state ID, Social Security number as a specific identifier that is binary, as opposed to having a signature match, which can be viewed as subjective and kind of undermines people's faith in the system to a degree, because like, oh, anybody could choose to take those signatures in. We don't know who actually did it. So we're going to see reforms, I guarantee that. But one of the things I will say is this is one of the easiest states to register. This is one of the easiest states to vote. It's very easy to vote and very hard to cheat. Yes, ma'am.
Can you recap the situation in Fulton County yesterday and the lawsuit that was filed in terms of the monitors?
Yeah. So they're at Georgia World Congress Center. That's a big place. So it's a difficult thing to allow people to move in and around the stuff that you're doing. Now, Fulton did a few extra things that I think were inappropriate given the way the law is written. The intention of the law is to allow monitors and the public to view the voting process, and that includes signature match, that includes counting, that includes all of that. Unfortunately, Fulton County put up some opaque barriers, so you couldn't see anything that they were doing. Now, their argument, and there's a push and pull with this, the state mandates that you protect the personal identifying information of individual voters and the secrecy of their vote. That's one side. It also says, hey, you have to let everybody see what's going on. So you have to have a balance between those things. In our opinion, and in the court's opinion, obviously, Fulton County went a little bit too much on the side of keeping monitors away. So they settled, Judge Barwick entered a consent order with the Republican Party, I think the Fulton County Republican Party and Fulton County, and they kind of split the baby. They were keeping them 20 feet away, they made it 10 feet away. They took down the opaque barriers, they put down tape that allowed them to get some better viewing. And we believe that sunlight and transparency is a better thing for people to feel more secure about this. And we instructed the counties, and even at 1 in the afternoon, we had resent to the Fulton County office, here's a state election board rule and the code section. You need to be we don't direct people, like, go talk to your county attorney, look at this, and you make better decisions about how you're letting people view these things. So in the future, we hope there'll be better practices, and hopefully we won't have gigantic World Congress Center type things. We'll have a more normal process that can allow for better and easier viewing.
You've been listening for the last 26 and a half minutes to Gabriel Sterling from the Secretary of State's office in Georgia, which of course is presided over by the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Gabriel Sterling has been in the middle of a firestorm with the White House, and it has been something to see over the last 8 weeks, and it has now turned into the day after the vote, and we have a complete wrap-up for you beginning right now.
11Alive News at 11:30 starts now.
I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
Making history at the polls, the Reverend Raphael Warnock projected to become the first black U.S. Senator in Georgia's history. And counting is underway for thousands of outstanding ballots which could decide the other Senate race. We have team coverage all across Metro Atlanta. And Congress is meeting today to solidify the electoral vote count for President-elect Joe Biden. But President Trump and his supporters are staging a last stand, a last-ditch effort. More than 4 million votes cast in the Senate runoff election to make history in Georgia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Hellinger. Well, it's morning, isn't it? It seems as though we're in the afternoon.
What time is it anyway? What day is it anyway? I think we all feel that way, Jeff. I'm Christy Diaz. Thanks for being with us on this midday. Democrat Reverend Raphael Warnock, the projected winner in the U.S. Senate race, which would make him the first black senator elected in our state. Here's a look at the numbers right now. You can see Raphael Warnock ahead by a fraction fraction of a percentage point, about 1.2% ahead of Kelly Loeffler. He has been declared the projected winner for this race, although Kelly Loeffler has not conceded. Reverend and Senator-elect Warnock spoke with us this morning and said how honored he was that the people of Georgia, his home state, have decided to send him to the United States Senate to represent their concerns at this defining moment in American history. He also spoke about his top priority for when he takes office.
We've got to get serious about this COVID-19 challenge, and the tone for that is set at the top. I think it's dangerous and unfortunate if we become numb to the death of 350,000 of our neighbors. I mean, we need to let that sit with us, and we need to let that guide us as we do the work that needs to be done. People need relief. We need to get the vaccine distributed safely and efficiently. And we need to learn the lessons of this pandemic. And one of those lessons is that we need all of our neighbors to have access to affordable health care. We are as close to one another, tied to one another in our collective destiny as a cough, as a sneeze. The other lesson we learned in this pandemic is that many of the people that we have diminished are absolutely critical. The folks we've ignored, the folks we refuse to pay a livable wage, all of a sudden, we're calling them essential workers.
Again, Reverend Warnock making history overnight. The race officially called around 2 a.m., now projected to be the first black U.S. Senator elected in the state of Georgia. At this point, Senator Kelly Loeffler has not conceded to him. We will be waiting and watching throughout the day for Senator Loeffler's remarks.
All right, let's take a look at the race between the incumbent, the Republican Senator David Perdue, and Democrat Jon Ossoff. Still, it is too close to call. The numbers as we see it right now, if we can take a look at those numbers, it will give you an overview as to where this stands this morning at 11:40 a.m. It is a group of numbers, certainly a tally that has stood this way for about 6 or 7 hours. When we went off the air last around 2 or 3 a.m. Is when those began to change. All right, so right now we have team coverage for you as counties continue to tabulate ballots. Mara Seriani is in Gwinnett County. Jerry Carnes is in Fulton County. But we are going to begin with Joe Ripley. He is in Dekalb. Joe, voter turnout there had a massive impact on these races.
You're absolutely right, Jeff. It was last night when Kelly Loeffler had a lead over Reverend Warnock until around midnight when they switched places in the Senate runoff race. Raphael Warnock got a big boost from a batch of ballots here in Dekalb County. Right now, election workers are inside counting remaining provisional and absentee ballots. Officials said they had technical issues to work out last night, so 19,000 ballots had to be counted manually. It kept workers here until 5 in the morning, so they are tired, believe me, but they're back, determined to get through the remaining number of ballots, though officials would not say how many were left to count. The ones that they are counting now don't have anything to do with that 19,000 that were affected by that technical glitch. Poll watchers here from both parties on hand to see this count play out. The results should favor both Warnock and Ossoff and add to their leads. Senator Loeffler did not concede, as you mentioned. Instead, she promised to fight till the finish.
I'm asking for every single Georgian, every single American, stay in the fight with us. We are going to keep fighting for you.
I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
Loeffler said there are more votes to count and every vote should be counted. She's in Washington, D.C. right now getting ready to object to the Electoral College ratification of Joe Biden as president. But history appearing to be made here in Georgia, due in large part to the voter turnout here in Dekalb County.
This morning, Jerry Carnes is now going to join us in Fulton County. Christy, let's go over to you right now at the board as we take a look at Fulton County right now. Where are we going? Are we going to Jerry Carnes right now? All right, Christy, we're going to go to you over the bridge right now.
All right, let's crunch some numbers. So here's what we just learned from the Secretary of State's office. Gabriel Sterling listed off about 13 counties that still have outstanding votes, and he listed the totals for them for each one. So let's just circle at least a few of these. We know we've still got some from Fulton. We've got some from Cobb and Chatham County down here by Savannah. He also listed Bryan County. He also listed Meriwether, Dougherty County, and Fayette that still have a few outstanding, and listed Thomas. And Clayton, let's see, it's up here. So all of these, you can see it's a smattering around the state. Several counties across the state still have outstanding ballots, but the difference from November is that it's not nearly as much as we saw in the presidential election. So let's take a look at where this race stands. Jon Ossoff still has the lead, but it is a narrow lead. Right now, he is ahead by 0.38% and is ahead by a total of 17,025 votes. And that changed overnight. Well, when a lot of people went to bed, Senator Perdue was ahead. And then overnight, Jon Ossoff took the lead, and throughout the morning, Dekalb County sent in some more votes. And as the sun came up, several more metro counties started counting again, and the votes started coming in, and that gap has widened. So now Jon Ossoff remains ahead by about 17,000 votes. And we also just heard from Gabriel Sterling with the Secretary of State's office say he thinks that although right now this is within the margin of a recount, he thinks in the end Ossoff will be outside of that 0.5 margin. So we'll keep our eye on that throughout the day, Jeff.
Christy, thank you. Tens of thousands of ballots still outstanding this morning. Jerry Carnes live in Fulton County with the very latest on the count there. Jerry.
Well, good morning, Jeff. We're going to give you a live look at what's going on here at the Georgia World Congress Center as Fulton election officials wrap up counting all of these ballots. What they're counting this morning are the absentee ballots that are remaining. Those absentee ballots, signature checked here, scanned and uploaded to a hard drive so that that can then be uploaded to the Secretary of State's office. Fulton's election chief, just moments ago announced that 101,000 people voted in person yesterday. That is nearly double the number that voted on Election Day in November. All of those votes have been counted along with the early votes and most of the absentee ballots. But what they're counting today are the absentee ballots that were collected from drop boxes yesterday. We're not sure of how many exactly are left to count, but it is under 3,000. The public is allowed to watch this process, and Fulton's election chief Richard Barron says a consent order signed yesterday made that easier. Well, Richard Barron told us that that consent order made it easier for folks to come in here and get a little bit closer. There you can see some of the observers who are here. Now, one more step might be necessary. If there are any questions about any of the absentee ballots, they will have to be what's called adjudicated, and a panel that will include folks from both the Republican and Democratic Party will look over those ballots if there are issues and resolve those issues before they are finally counted. That panel will meet at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
All right, Jerry, thank you. Gwinnett also working to finish counting and uploading about 5,000 votes to the state's tally. Mara Sirianni is there with the latest.
Here at Gwinnett Elections headquarters, they spent the morning working through about 5,000 mail.
All right, we're having a few problems here, but we'll get it together. We have more on our election coverage throughout the day. You can head to 11alive.com for the very latest election results. You can find exactly what you want to see, all the numbers, all of the tallies, counties as well. That's your place for all the information. You can also download the 11Alive app to have alerts sent to your phone. And 11Alive is where Atlanta speaks. Your voice is important. We want it to be part of the conversation of this Georgia Senate runoff election. We would love to hear why you voted. For example, did you flip your party vote, or maybe you didn't vote in November, but you opted to vote in this election? You can share your story and do so very easily at 678-765-9514. That number again, 678-765-9514. We'll share some of your stories on air and online.
Atlanta's former police chief has been tapped to head the Louisville Metro Police Department. Erica Shields stepped down as Atlanta's police chief in June after police shot and killed Rayshard Brooks. The case coming under sharp scrutiny with 2 officers charged in the case, and at the time, APD was already under fire for how officers handled the arrest of 2 college students during a protest the month before. Several officers in that case were also charged. Today, Shields talked about how she plans to address officer behavior in her new role.
Body-worn cameras have provided a window into conduct like we've never had before in law enforcement. And to not fully leverage auditing and reviewing body-worn cameras to see how officers are conducting themselves when no one is present is imperative to reining in problem behavior.
Chief Shields takes over a department that has struggled over the past year with criticism over the shooting death of Breonna Taylor, a black woman killed during the execution of a no-knock warrant. Our sister station in Louisville also reports the city has lost more than 15% of its police officers and is experiencing a record high number of shootings.
Congress preparing to certify Joe Biden's presidential victory today, but pro-Trump protests are drawing thousands to our nation's capital. There have already been arrests, including the leader of the so-called Proud Boys. He has been banned from the area. When the vote happens, at least 13 Republican senators and dozens in the House plan to object, including Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler. The objections may delay but not stop Congress from declaring Joe Biden the winner of the election. Protesters gathered again today in Freedom Plaza, waiting on the president to speak. He has put the pressure on Vice President Mike Pence, claiming he can intervene in the count. But the vice president does not have the power to do that. D.C.'s mayor has mobilized the National Guard in response to the protests and also upped police presence.
11:49 is current time, and you'll notice some clouds moving into the forecast area. High, thin clouds. We call them cirrus clouds moving over. This is the Noonan. Our live shot Noonan here, and it shows the sunshine poking through. In fact, kind of facing the sun, so you can't see. You see the dark side of the buildings there, but the sun is shining through, and so not a bad day, at least starting off for this morning. There's a better look at the clouds we can see on the radar here. It's thicker in some spots, headed toward Atlanta right now. It's a little area of thick clouds, and that'll be off and on as we head through the rest of the afternoon. Thicker clouds will move in a little bit later on tonight and tomorrow, as we'll start to see a chance for rain begin to increase for our Thursday. Not today, though. Temperatures are already in the 40s, 45 degrees right now in Atlanta. We're looking at 44 degrees in Marietta, 41 up toward Rome. Really cool up here to the north. Blairsville, you're at 38 degrees, 50 over in Edenton and also down toward Thomaston. So warming up a little bit with the sunshine. Again, high, thin clouds. We'll give it a 10 today. Not bad. We started out very chilly with temperatures right around 31 degrees. Again, getting up to a pair of nickels this afternoon. That's how we're going to rate your weather on a scale from 1 to 11. We'll give it a 10 for today. Tomorrow, a little different story. In fact, tonight even, as those clouds will continue to push in, you can see the rain building now as it's moving out of eastern Texas into Louisiana and Arkansas. Will continue to build. In fact, could see some severe weather down in eastern Texas this afternoon. That system is headed toward us. Now, it won't arrive here until tomorrow afternoon and evening is when we'll start to see the rain. I think it will turn heavy on us at times, especially as we head toward the evening. Our wind started out more northerly this morning, now to the east around this area of high pressure that's going to continue to slide over toward the east as well. Here's how it all plays out for us in the forecast track model. You can follow along with the time right there at the top of the screen. Shows that rain back off to the west. Our clouds thickening later on tonight. Here we are by 7:30, looking at mostly cloudy skies by then. We'll hold on to the clouds as we head into Thursday morning, but it will be a dry commute for those of us that have to go into work. You're looking at the clouds now, but once we get toward the afternoon and toward the evening, here comes that rain, and it will be heavy at times. That's indicated by these yellows here. That's moderate rain, little orange pockets here and there. Not expecting much in the way of any thunders, but we will be looking at the potential for some snow up here in the far northeast. Could see some snow begin to mix in, especially as we head toward the evening. Some cooler air coming in. The area of low pressure starts to move over toward the east. We'll get even colder air drawing down. So as far south as maybe Dawson, you could be getting a little bit of a mix. When we talk about a mix of precipitation as far as rain and snow, you're not talking about much in the way of accumulation. You got to go up in the higher elevations of the North Georgia mountains to find maybe an inch of that snow. Should be tapering off as we head into Friday morning, certainly by the afternoon as the area of low pressure gets out of the way. Then we'll clear it out, dry out just in time for the upcoming weekend. Don't go anywhere. We got much more for you coming up after the break.
About 1 million absentee ballots were cast for the Senate runoff, according to the Secretary of State's office. But just because you mailed in your ballot or you dropped it off, that doesn't mean it counted. There's actually a process that election workers use to check the ballots, and then a separate two-step process for voters if their ballot is rejected. Voters can see their absentee ballot and if it was accepted through the Secretary of State's My Voter page. And if it was rejected, you only have 3 days after the election to cure it. Here's how that works. Under Georgia state law, the County Board of Registrars has to immediately inform the voter if their ballot is rejected. The National Conference of State Legislatures says the voter then must submit their voter identification and an affidavit confirming the ballot submitted was theirs in order to cure the ballot. Once it's cured, then it can be counted for the election. Again, you have 3 days after the election to cure your ballot. The deadline for this election is Friday, January 8th. So be sure to check your status on the My Voter page and then follow those steps. We have more information and a repeat if you need to see it on 11alive.com.
Eleven Alive News at noon starts now.
I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
Making history at the polls, the Reverend Raphael Warnock projected to become the first black U.S. Senator in Georgia's history. And counting underway for thousands of outstanding ballots, which could decide the other Senate race. We have team coverage all across Metro Atlanta. And Congress is meeting today to solidify the electoral vote for President-elect Joe Biden. But President Trump and his supporters are staging a last stand. More than 4 million votes cast in the Senate runoff election to make history in Georgia. And good afternoon, I'm Jeff Hullinger.
And I'm Christy Diaz. Democrat Reverend Raphael Warnock, the projected winner in his U.S. Senate race, which would make him the first black senator elected in our state. So here's a look at the numbers as they stand right now. We just got about 500 votes in, very slim change, but still shows Reverend Raphael Warnock ahead by about 1.2%, ahead by about 54,000 votes at this time. Senator Kelly Loeffler has not conceded to him, but Reverend Raphael Warnock has been projected the winner of this race. Warnock spoke with us this morning and said how honored he was that the people of Georgia, his home state, have decided to send him to the United States Senate to represent their concerns at this defining moment in American history. He also spoke about his top priority for when he takes office.
We've got to get serious about this COVID-19 challenge, and the tone for that is set at the top. I think it's dangerous and unfortunate if we become numb to the death of 350,000 of our neighbors. I mean, we need to let that sit with us, and we need to let that guide us as we do the work that needs to be done. People need relief. We need to get the vaccine distributed safely and efficiently. And we need to learn the lessons of this pandemic. And one of those lessons is that we need all of our neighbors to have access to affordable health care. We are as close to one another, tied to one another in our collective destiny as a cough, as a sneeze. The other lesson we learned in this pandemic is that many of the people that we have diminished are absolutely critical. The folks we've ignored, the folks we refuse to pay a livable wage, all of a sudden, we're calling them essential workers.
Again, Reverend Warnock making history overnight. That race called around 2 a.m. And now he is projected to be the first black U.S. senator elected in the state of Georgia. At this point, Senator Kelly Loeffler not conceded, but we will be waiting and watching throughout the day for any remarks from Senator Loeffler.
All right, we have team coverage as some counties continue to tabulate ballots. Mara Sariani is in Gwinnett County, Jerry Carnes in Fulton, and we begin with Joe Ripley, who is in Dekalb. Joe, voter turnout there had a major impact on the end result.
You're absolutely right, Jeff. Last night, Reverend Raphael Warnock was behind Senator Kelly Loeffler. Then around midnight, things started to shift and change. Big boost for Reverend Warnock here because of votes from Dekalb County. Those votes coming in around that midnight hour to push him ahead, and he would not let go of his lead since then. Right now, election workers are inside counting and tabulating a few more absentee and provisional ballots. Officials said technical issues slowed that process down overnight. The county having to count 19,000 votes manually. It kept workers here until 5 in the morning, so they are tired, but the workers are back here today, determined to get through the remaining number of ballots, though officials would not tell me how many were left to count. Poll watchers from both parties are on hand here today to see this count play out. The results should favor both Warnock and Ossoff and add to their leads. Senator Loeffler, as you mentioned, did not concede. Instead, though, she promised to fight till the finish.
So I'm asking for every single Georgian, every single American, stay in the fight with us. We are going to keep fighting for you.
I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
Loeffler said there are still more votes to count, and every vote should be counted. Want to note she's in Washington, D.C. this afternoon, planning to object to the Electoral College's ratification of Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. But history appearing to be made here in Dekalb County, here in Georgia, in large part due to voter turnout in Dekalb County.
All right, Joe, let's dig into the numbers now. This is what is at stake in this race that is still left between Jon Ossoff and David Perdue. It is the balance of power in the Senate. This one circle left is still up for grabs, and it is surrounded in a blue rim because at this point, Ossoff is ahead in that race. Let's dig into how much. All right, so this is where we stood in the last half hour, where he led by about 17,025 votes. That has already changed. We, in the last 5 or 10 minutes, got about 500 votes in, still figuring out exactly where it's from. But the new number is now 17,169. That is now the margin between Ossoff and Perdue. Ossoff leads by that much, and the margin only changed by 0.01%. So this is one of those things where we know we still have several counties tabulating votes. We're going to get them incrementally, little by little. So this will change little by little throughout the day. But right now, as the Secretary of State said, he believes that Ossoff will eventually win this race outside the margin of a recount, which is 0.5%. And this is where we stand right now. So to hear more from the Secretary of State and his press conference early this morning was Liza Lucas. Liza, what did you hear?
Well, Christy, that thing that you just said right there, that Gabriel Sterling, Secretary of State's office, he believes that it is likely that Jon Ossoff will not only win, but be above that recount threshold. That was certainly a notable point made during the recent press conference. Another thing that Gabriel Sterling was very upfront about, at this point, there has been no evidence of any irregularities. And he's been busy on Twitter throughout the course of the night and this morning, debunking and even at times taking on the president again regarding claims that have been circulating online. He also said at this point there has been no complaint from the candidates, though he does anticipate questions coming into the office, especially given these margins that we're seeing. And he brought up the fact that this runoff has avoided issues that Georgia elections, frankly, have had in the past and are, quite frankly, known for.
And had record turnout in each and every election we saw. That is unprecedented. And I want to give a big thank you again to the elections officials and poll workers and elections workers who really worked their tails off to make this a successful election for Georgians. One of the things we haven't heard about in this election was nobody was complaining about lines. Nobody's saying they were disenfranchised.
A high stakes runoff indeed, and that high turnout just evidence of that. In fact, Gabriel Sterling, he made note today that around 100,000 people who did not vote in the general election, they actually came out to vote for the runoff. Again, he says that that is just a testament to the groups that have been working behind the scenes to rally voters throughout this process. And again, just more proof of the high interest we have here in this Georgia race.
All right, Liza Lucas from downtown Atlanta. Liza, thank you. Fulton County still working to get thousands of ballots uploaded into the state's tally. Jerry Carnes joins us live from the Georgia World Congress Center. A hive of activity as workers have come back.
Good afternoon, Jeff. They are getting really close to counting those final ballots here at the Georgia World Congress Center. Right before you came to us, they announced that they were going on a lunch break here, but they've got about 2,700 absentee ballots yet to count. The process here involves signature checks and then scanning those absentee ballots, putting them onto a flash drive, and then uploading them to the Secretary of State's office. Just a short time ago, Fulton County's election chief told us that the number of people who voted in person yesterday was nearly double the number that voted on Election Day in November. Of course, all of those votes have been counted along with the early votes, and most of the absentee ballots, the ones that they are working on today, were collected from drop boxes yesterday prior to the 7 p.m. deadline. Again, about 2,700 of those yet to count. The public is allowed to watch the process here, and Fulton's election chief Richard Barron says a consent order signed yesterday makes that easier.
But we agreed to certain parameters for monitors that were there and giving them more access. And we negotiated distance requirements and a couple other minor measures.
Now, if there are any issues with any of these absentee ballots, a panel will look over those ballots and try to settle those issues. There's a panel that can be observed by both Republicans and Democrats. They will meet at 3 o'clock this afternoon to finalize those ballots, to resolve any issues, if any exist, and then that will be the final step.
All right, Jerry, thanks very much. Gwinnett County also working to finish its count. Mara Sirianni has the latest from there.
Here at Gwinnett Elections headquarters, they spent the morning working through about 5,000 mail-in ballots. It was smooth sailing on Election Day, and today is proving to be no different. You can see workers opening and scanning ballots. Again, they have roughly 5,000 absentees to get through that were accepted on Election Day. In total, more than 363,000 of the county's 600,000 registered voters cast ballots in the runoff. Gwinnett voters showing up in record numbers.
I'm so impressed with turnout during the general election, and you know, with this runoff, you know, runoffs can be so disappointing, you know, 15%, 30%, wherever the range is, but for the county to have 62%.
And the county also has about 900 provisional ballots. Officials say those could take a bit longer to get through.
11Alive is where Atlanta speaks. Your voice is important. We want to include it in the conversation about the Georgia Senate runoff election. We would like to hear from you about how you voted. For example, did you flip your party vote, or maybe you didn't vote in November, but you voted in this election? You can share your story, 678-765-9514, and that number again, 678-765-9514. We'll be sharing some of those stories on air and online. Chesley?
All right, Jeff, we had some sunshine earlier this morning, but now the clouds are starting to move in. Here's a live look at Noonan, our camera in Noonan. You can see those clouds starting to thicken up just a little bit, and they'll be off and on as we head through the rest of the afternoon. You'll get some peaks of sunshine, let's put it that way, as temperatures will warm up into the 50s. We're close right now. Close. Here's a better look at those clouds. No rain coming out of the clouds at all. That rain is well off to the west of us. It will eventually get in here by Thursday, late afternoon into the evening, but today will be a dry one. 49 degrees, the current temperature in Atlanta, 48 in Peachtree City, close to where we were just showing you that Noonan Tower cam. 48 right now in Marietta, 45 in Dalton, 39 right now in Blairsville. That is the cool spot. We'll heat up to about 55 degrees for an afternoon high, with those clouds continuously moving right on in. 47 degrees by 7 o'clock tonight. We'll have mostly cloudy skies by then, and expecting that rain to come in by Thursday afternoon. Could be some snow in our area. We'll talk more about that in the full forecast coming up. Stay with us. Got much more for you coming up.
Georgia voters make history. The Democrat, the Reverend Raphael Warnock, projected to unseat Kelly Loeffler and become Georgia's first black senator. The other race between Senator David Perdue and Jon Ossoff still close to call, but Mr. Ossoff has pulled ahead. So where do we go from here, and How did we get here? Joining me right now, Emory political science professor Dr. Andra Gillespie and Republican strategist Mike Hassinger. I got a text in the last hour from a Republican friend of mine who's been involved in politics all of his life, his family as well. It's sort of the family business. And he says all of this is on the doorstep of President Trump. He says since November 3rd, he talked about a rigged election, declared war on Governor Kemp and Secretary of State Raffensperger, toyed with not signing the stimulus, undercut Mitch McConnell on the $2,000 checks, attacked Senate Republican leaders, vetoed the defense bill, and told the Secretary of State on that famous phone call to find him some votes. Dr. Gillespie, let's start with you. Do you agree with that sort of take on how things have transpired and why we are where we are today?
Well, I would need more evidence and testing before I, make that conclusion. Suffice to say, I would much rather have a disciplined surrogate than an undisciplined surrogate. And I think the big issue here is that given how narrow the margins are in this race, there are a lot of people who are thinking that if President Trump had been more disciplined and had not made, the runoff race about himself too, that perhaps Republicans would have been in a better position to find, the extra, few tens of thousands of votes that they would have needed to beat Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. But I think one of the other big things that's important, and we shouldn't discount it, is Democrats changed their outreach strategy. They were reluctant in the general election to go knock on the doors to canvass because of COVID. Canvassing is the best way to increase voter turnout. So when they decided that they would match Republicans by knocking on doors too, they drove up Democratic turnout, and they are reaping the benefits of taking that risk.
Mike, do you think Republicans today, for the most part, are viewing this in the context of President Trump and what transpired here?
I think there's a grand old Republican tradition every time we lose an election of immediately assigning blame. And that's going to go on for some time. President Trump's actions over the last 9 weeks have certainly played a big factor in dampening Republican turnout, increasing Democrat turnout, and quite frankly, changing the minds of a lot of suburban voters who normally used to be pretty reliably Republican and are not hard to turn out. But you can also assign some blame to Republican officials who went along with all of his sort of chaotic nonsense and conspiracy theories, from GOP State Party Chair David Schaefer to Georgia's congressional delegation, amplifying conspiracy theories and basically discouraging people, Republicans, from believing in the process and doing so much that they didn't show up.
Eric Erickson said this morning on a radio podcast that he thinks David Schaefer ought to resign as the head of the Georgia Republican Party. Do you agree with that opinion?
Well, I think he's going to have to when he goes to run for lieutenant governor or governor in 2022.
You believe he will run for lieutenant governor?
Oh, I think that's a strong possibility. Of course, you can't make predictions, but there is a perceived weakness around Brian Kemp right at the moment, coming from the sort of the Trump factor of the GOP electorate. And David Schaefer is very ambitious. He would be silly not to at least be considering that right now.
Dr. Gillespie, do you believe, as Gabriel Sterling of the Secretary of State's office said earlier this morning, that Republicans did not take advantage of all of the tools of the vote, meaning absentee ballots, early voting, all of those kinds of issues that really constricted their ability to get out the vote? And as you take a look at Northwest Georgia and some of those traditionally fire engine red counties, there was not the voter turnout that was expected.
I agree 110%. More than 2/3 of the votes that were cast in this runoff were cast before Election Day. And so when President Trump set the tone of discouraging Republicans from casting absentee votes, which prior to this election cycle, Republicans were more than happy to vote by mail. And we're actually even slightly more likely to vote by mail if we look at studies from other states than they were to use other methods of voting. it doesn't make sense. You can't make up that type of deficit in a day if Democrats are banking votes and banking them days and weeks in advance. So I think going forward, Republicans very much need to rethink the strategy of discouraging people from voting by mail. And I will say that optically, going into the General Assembly and trying to eliminate absentee voting entirely is probably not the best strategy. And a lot of people are going to legitimately cry voter suppression as a result of it, because the only motivation for this is not voter fraud, but that they just lost an election because lots of people voted Democrat by mail.
Dr. Gillespie and Mike Hassinger, thanks. We will see you on our broadcasts coming up a little bit later in the afternoon at 5 o'clock and 6 as well. All right, we will take a break right now and continue right here on 11Alive.
Some .22 is the current time. Welcome back to the show. We are looking at clouds moving into the forecast area, but no rain coming out of there. So maybe your garden this afternoon, right? Got plans? Maybe break down that Christmas tree, compost it a little bit there. It was a cool start for us, but we're heating up finally. Temperatures getting up closer to 50 miles per hour. 50, I'm looking at the winds, thinking about miles per hour. 50 degrees right now, but we'll get up to 55 for an afternoon high. There's a better look at those clouds. We started out with some sun, but now the clouds are starting to roll in thicker in some spots, and I think that's the way it's going to be off and on for the rest of the afternoon. At times, you'll see the sun peeking through those clouds, those high, thin clouds that we have out there. There we go, close to 50 degrees right now in Atlanta at 49, 48 Peachtree City, 48 also in Covington, 51 in Athens, a little bit more sun over here to the east, 52 over toward Edenton. Pretty cool up here to the north. You're at 40 right now in Blairsville at the current tower. Again, 55 for the high. We're giving it a 10 on the wasometer for today, despite those clouds, because again, we'll get a little bit of sun poking through. Now tomorrow, a different story. Our clouds will increase tonight, and then we'll be looking at this rain moving a bit closer to our area. Won't get in here until tomorrow afternoon. I'm thinking late afternoon going into Friday. That's when we'll see it. Not as heavy as what you're experiencing or what they will be experiencing out to the west. We'll see those clouds increase. Start off Thursday morning with a mix of sun and clouds. Then by late afternoon, here comes that rain. Now, that yellow indicates that the rain could be heavy off and on at times. We'll also turn our attention up here to the far north, where we could be seeing some snow mixing in, especially in the far northeast. We're not talking about a lot of accumulation in the low level areas, but in the higher elevations, there could be about an inch, maybe 2. And then we'll clear it out as we head into Friday, late Friday, going into Saturday, which means we'll have a drier weekend, but it will be cooler. Temperatures only at 48 degrees for the high on Saturday with mostly sunny skies, 51 after a 29-degree start on Saturday with clouds increasing once again. And our next best chance for rain won't come until Monday. We'll be back right after this.
Atlanta's former police chief has been tapped to head the Loeffler Metro Police Department. Erica Shields stepped down as Atlanta's police chief back in June after police shot and killed Rayshard Brooks. The case coming under sharp scrutiny with 2 officers charged in the case. And at the time, APD was already under fire for how officers handled the arrest of 2 college students during a protest just the month before. Several officers in that case were also charged. Today, Shields talked about how she plans to address officer behavior in her new role.
Body-worn cameras have provided a window into conduct like we've never had before in law enforcement. And to not fully leverage auditing and reviewing body-worn cameras to see how officers are conducting themselves when no one is present is imperative to reining in problem behavior.
Chief Shields takes over a department that has struggled over the past year with criticism over the shooting death of Breonna Taylor, a black woman killed during the execution of a no-knock warrant. Our sister station in Louisville also reports the city has lost more than 15% of its police officers and is experiencing a record high number of shootings.
Congress preparing to certify Joe Biden's presidential victory today, but pro-Trump protests are drawing thousands to the nation's capital. There have already been arrests, including the leader of the Proud Boys. He's been banned from that area. When the vote happens, at least 13 Republican senators and dozens in the House plan to object, including Georgia's Senator Kelly Loeffler. The objections may delay but not stop Congress from declaring Joe Biden the winner of the November election. Protesters are gathered again today in Freedom Plaza. President Trump addressing them right now. He has put the pressure on Vice President Mike Pence, claiming he can intervene in the count. But the vice president does not have the power to do that. We'll bring you any highlights from the president's speech on 11alive.com and on our broadcast air beginning at 5 o'clock.
Before we go, let's take a look at the coronavirus numbers in Georgia. Cases are on the rise across the state, putting a strain on our hospitals. The state reported more than 6,000 new cases yesterday. This is the 6th highest day since the start of the pandemic. The number of patients also hit a new high yesterday. More than 5,200 Georgians are currently in the hospital with the virus. The state also reported 66 additional deaths. This is much higher than our current weekly average. All right, thanks so much for watching 11 Alive News at noon. We'll be back with you here at 5, or at least Jeff will, with the latest election results. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe.